Everybody, and this is the second and final day, unfortunately, of the Amarone opera Prima, which showcases the new vintage of 2018. But before all of that, I must introduce you to, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to JC Viens, who is without doubt um, not only the senior ambassador for Amarone and Valpolicella, but he's a wine educator, a wine speaker of huge renown and rapport. Um, and I would say, am I correct? You're a decanter wine judge.
Yes, also.
Ah,
I was a decanter wine judge in Hong Kong when they did the Asia Wine Awards, and now I have started to participate in London as well, with great honor and great pleasure.
well, I'm sure that the pleasure is what you give in your notes and your storytelling, which you're very famous for. And I have been witness, and as I said, huge pleasure to witness two master classes of JC. Is it okay if I call you JC?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Also, my mother calls me JC now.
Ah, well, my mother calls me Mr. Wood, but we won't go into that. So that's Jean Charles?
Jean-Charles,
Yeah,
yes.
okay,
Yes,
fine.
yes.
So, the storyteller, let me ask you to tell us a brief story on how you came into the wine business.
In fact, this is, thank you for this question, because when I lived in Hong Kong, I was involved with manufacturing in China. And one day, my wife did not know what to offer me for Christmas. And so she offered me a WSET course. And I was invited by my teacher one day to teach one session that he could not attend. And I fell in love with teaching about wine.
Mm.
And so at that moment, I fell in love more about talking about it than drinking it, actually. This is very strange. And then from then on, I decided to call myself a storyteller because it sounds better than educator.
Well, this is very interesting. When the teacher asks the student to take the class, it must prove one or two things that the student is on the way upward. And bravo to the teacher.
Or maybe he thought I was too talkative during the class. And so he
Well,
said, if you talk so much, why don't you come and teach the class?
that's another way. Another way of putting it. So your obvious passion for the area of Valpolicella and its wines have come to I've come to appreciate your the passion that I just mentioned, because these two master classes that you took were fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
No, I say that with genuine honesty. They were absolutely fascinating. Um, but one thing that was never explained to me, and if it was, and I missed it, I apologize. What do you feel is the difference the area has changed, if it has changed, from say 15, 20 years ago, the wines, to the wines of today? Is there a change in the style? Are you noticing things? Because obviously you're
To be frank, I have started to take a special interest in the region only recently.
oh,
So maybe perhaps less than 5 or 6 years. But I remember very clearly that one day I came to Vinitaly, I think it was maybe 10, 12 years ago. So it's about in the time range that you're talking about. And I remember at that moment uh, to speak with my friends about ordering a ripasso on the menu at the restaurant.
yeah.
And my friends, including some Italians, including some foreigners, they did not know what it was a ripasso. They did not understand the category.
Mm-hmm.
And because at that moment I was very curious about Italian wine, I was also curious, I was learning about wine, so I was curious about techniques to make the wine. So for me, it was a beautiful experiment to actually finally taste the wine that I had learned theoretically about. So what happened? What changed? Today we only speak about Ripasso.
Mm-hmm.
Today we only speak about Amarone. And it seems that perhaps we have forgotten about what made this region in the first place, which is the Valpolicella and Valpolicella Superiore. So if you ask me what changed, is perhaps like me, 10, 12 years ago, people became interested in Ripasso, they fell in love with Ripasso, and they forgot the origin. And now it's time for us to return back to the origin of Valpolicella, Valpolicella Superiore, because there are some very delicious and beautiful wines in those two categories as well.
It's very, very interesting. I mean, obviously, you've tasted wines that are older than 10 or 15 years, and I just wondered if there was a style change, because I seem to sort of recall, in my very amateur way, lately, the last 5 years, there's a lighter style coming out.
In the latest 5 years.
Yeah.
In fact, yesterday in our master classes, perhaps you will have noticed that we tasted 2008 and 2006.
Yes.
And these ones had the highest, here in Italy they call this estrato secco, which is the dry extract.
That's
so
right.
the fuller bodied,
Yes.
the more concentrated,
broad shoulders.
Broad shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And because these wines were made in an era when the regulations actually required more concentration and power from the Riserva wine. And since then, that regulation has changed. Because we have to understand one of the reasons of the so-called tradition of appassimento, because in the past, it was difficult to fully ripen Corvina, Corvinone, Rondinella, and especially Molinara.
Yes.
So because it was cooler conditions, more difficult conditions, and so the so-called appassimento helped to put a little bit more sugar concentration, but also the appassimento helped to make the green pirazino disappear.
Yeah.
So therefore, this is a technique that actually really helped when the grapes are not in a perfect ripeness level.
Yeah, you get that greenness come through.
That's right. Yeah. But now with climate change, what happens is that we obtain a more balanced fruit at maturation. So today they are able to harvest grapes that are in the correct, I should say, window of ripeness. And so therefore, there is less need to request from the rules, less need to request more appassimento or more extract to balance out this high acidity or balance out grapes that don't provide as much natural concentration. And so it's normal that you notice today the wines in Amarone or Ripasso are perhaps a bit fresher because we have grapes that are actually picked in the exact correct window of picking them. And this also brings me back to the Valpolicella and Valpolicella category, which are today picked in the correct window to make wines of fresh grapes, and that are also very delicious. And so this is what is changing. Not only the rules, but also the climate is helping this area actually.
Okay, fine. One question that's always sort of interested me is that I've been coming to this area on and off for about 35 years.
Lucky.
And yeah, very lucky. And I've noticed that now the sons and the daughters are taking over.
Yes, yes.
And they're bringing new ideas.
Yes, yes. In fact, an initiative of the Consortio, Tutela Vini Valpolicella, was to have created this group of young winemakers, young enologists, agronomists, and they are really creating this sort of committee to really discuss ideas for the future. And they are really, really committed to these giovani, as they call them here, of course, the young people.
Yeah.
And in fact, the first master class when we met each other last June was devoted to the producers who make less than 100,000 bottles, and a lot of them, many of them were young producers, and it's really amazing to see their talent, their energy. They really believe in this region, and they really believe in a different future, but always respecting what came before. but adding their knowledge from school. But sometimes we speak about an enology school or a university as not necessarily a good thing because it gives a method. But these young people are really thinking, and they're really
And
trying
they're
to
challenging everything.
exactly. And this is interesting.
Uh,
And the last interesting things that I can say now is that they're actually meeting with each other and they're tasting with each other, which their parents did not do.
No, 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 no.
That's right.
This is endemic in Italian wine. Nobody speaks to anybody. The neighbors just wave to each other, and that's it.
That's right.
Okay, well, look, I could talk to JC all day, and he's a very busy man. So, I thank you for your time.
I know it's really my pleasure.
No,
Really, really my pleasure.
JC, I can assure you the pleasure is all ours and now yours. Um, and finally, do you sort of feel that Italian wine generally, which I understand is now the largest exporter of wine by any country in the world,
Yes.
um, do you feel that the standards of the wines are increasing year upon year, irrespective of the vintage problems with the weather, with the new heat and all the rest of it? You feel that generally, because it's not just this area that you have huge knowledge on.
For me, in my experience, and I think this is also your experience with Italian wine, it's a very interesting country in the sense that we always talk about 2,000 years of history, of traditions. But when we think about it, Italy is a very young country. It suffered greatly from the oidium crisis, the phylloxera crisis. After that, there was the First World War, Second World War. And after that, it also suffered somehow in the so-called Trente Glorieuses. In French, we say the 30 years after the war created this situation of extreme economic growth that perhaps the producers were more concerned with supplying demand rather than perhaps focusing on quality. And since the 80s, 90s, there is a totally different change of attitude. And now producers, since then, have invested tremendously in upgrading their skills, their facilities, their vineyards, documenting everything they're doing. So there has been, as you know, a revolution since the 80s, 90s. And this revolution is very positive, bringing a situation where I think we have not seen yet what Italy is capable of producing in terms of quality, personality, and we are going to be very impressed as we start to continue to move ahead. I think
couldn't agree with you more.
You have seen the
Absolutely.
same,
I mean, the explosion of quality coming from Sicily and the south is quite extraordinary. I mean, even Basilicata and Calabria producing one or two very, very qualitative wines.
Exactly.
But Sicily, Mount Etna, it speaks for itself.
Oh yes, this is also a phenomenon that is very exciting.
Puglia and the grapes, so many indigenous grapes of the area to be welcome to the palates of our viewers here.
Yes.
Look, I must stop now, sadly, but I thank you greatly because
thank you, really. It's fine.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Well, that's all we've got time now for from Verona, and all I can say is that if you're going to your enoteca or wine shop, don't forget this region because you're missing out a great treat.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you to you.